Well now, for that special BBC Midlands investigation by this programme and Inside Out into what became of the vast property portfolio acquired with public money to turn around the Midlands economy. It belonged to the former development agency Advantage West Midlands. Well, now, having scrapped AWM, the coalition government appears to have clawed back many of its assets as well. It's a story that's taken us months to uncover, and yet, as Giles Latcham explains, much of it remains unclear.
Meet Jasvinder. Jasvinder lives in Birmingham, but in a couple of weeks' time she'll be moved out of her home so the developers can bulldoze it.
Got a lovely house here. We're living happily here.
Jasvinder lives on a site earmarked for a supermarket and hotel, yet there's no timescale for when building work will start.
What price can they pay for my memories I have created here in this house? I met my husband here first time. This is my children's first home.
It's land that was once identified for regeneration by the Regional Development Agency, Advantage West Midlands. For 13 years, AWM existed to secure investment and create jobs. Taxpayer funded, it spent millions buying landmark sites. They were bought to establish technology corridors, science parks, business gateways, creating an estimated 10,000 jobs and £328 million a year. When it shut in March, AWM owned 38 properties outright and had a stake in over 100 more. A flash sale of some land made £26 million, money that went straight to the Treasury. Incredibly, the government's unable to give us complete records of the sales. So in most cases, we don't know who bought the land. And there's more. We've discovered that Advantage West Midlands had a second, much bigger portfolio of property that wasn't sold. Instead, it was seized by Whitehall for control by central government. And the value of that holding? £64 million.
I would have liked to have seen it stay local and stay under local control, whether with local authorities, so that they can actually develop that in our interest and help them kickstart the economy rather than going back to London.
So what's the government doing with this land? We've been given a document which shows for the first time exactly what's happening, and it revealed something else.
We've brought you to this patch of land particularly because of Plot A, as it's referred to, Bilston Urban Village.
What that is saying is that originally this land was bought by the Regional Development Agency, paid for by local taxpayers. It was transferred back to London, and now it's been bought again by Wolverhampton City Council. So local taxpayers have actually paid for this twice.
The cost second time around, £500,000. We met the government agency now responsible for managing former AWM land at a site in Birmingham.
When the land is sold, the money goes into a national pot, and that money is then redistributed out into regeneration of sites across the country depending on where a need is.
With Bilston Village, it looks rather as if the council taxpayers of Wolverhampton have had to pay twice for that patch of land.
Well, I certainly don't know about them paying twice, but when you look at the whole of the plans for Bilston Urban Village, and actually the benefit to Wolverhampton taxpayers will be at least 5 times more than the cost of that land.
The government now has other ways to channel regeneration cash, but while trying to establish how many millions this region's lost, we uncovered a path shrouded in confusion.
As a result, we've had to rely on newspaper cuttings and old parliamentary reports for our limited facts. But based on our research, our best guess is that the West Midlands handed over £107 million in land and property, the most of all the regions bar one, the South East.
We've lost the money paid to develop these sites. We've lost the money to be made from selling them. How much of it we'll ever see again, we may never know.
Giles Latcham. And there will be an extended report on Inside Out here in the Midlands on BBC1 tomorrow evening at 7:30. Well, of course, we asked the business department why the records of the sale of so much of AWM's property were not available, and they told us regional development agencies were locally led and responsible for disposing of their own assets and for making sure each sale gave value for money. Well, we're also joined here today by Gerard Coyne. He's the Regional Secretary of the Unite Union, and he served on the board of Advantage West Midlands from 2003 until the winding up process in 2011. So you were at the death there. Just give us a sense of how you interpret the events that we've seen there in Charles's report.
It's a disgrace that BIS is trying to put the blame back onto the RDAs. We diligently catalogued and documented all of the land sales and the land and assets that were in the RDA's control and forwarded that on to BIS as the overseeing department, and were praised by the National Audit Office by the way that we actually conducted that closure. So
you're saying that what you handed over to central government was in order, but maybe it was just the sheer volume that was such a challenge for them to process, given that there were 7 other RDAs as well.
That is absolutely right. There was a huge amount of information that was documented at that time and handed over to government. But I have to say that the government's response and the way that they were handling the wind down of the RDAs was shambolic at the time, almost as shambolic as the replacement Regional Growth Fund.
And this, of course, was public money which was intended to promote regional regeneration in our part of the country. Did you try to resist the idea of it being sort of subsumed, clawed back into the central pot in Whitehall?
Absolutely. The board of AWM made a number of representations on the basis that the assets should remain within the West Midlands. They were brought together for the benefit of the people of the West Midlands, and we tried to make the argument that they should be either disposed to the local authorities or the local enterprise partnerships, but central government was of the view that they should be used for funding regeneration and also deficit reduction. And I think it's the latter that actually this money has gone towards. It's deficit reduction that it has been spent on.
Doesn't it possibly indicate as well that there was just too much money sloshing around the development agencies?
No, certainly not. I mean, in terms of the investment that AWM in particular was involved in, for every £1 of public money spent, then £8 was generated in the economy. So actually it was handled very, very well.
Bill Cash, it's very difficult to arrive at a judgment if we don't actually know in the final analysis what the calculation really is that Gerard's referred to there. I mean, what is the answer as far as you can see? What should the government do now?
Well, first of all, I don't disagree that there is a very strong case for the money to remain in the West Midlands. Having said that, what does amaze me is that there is total obfuscation, complete smoke and mirrors about where this money appears to have gone. And I see that the Controller and Auditor General has looked into this and the National Audit Office, but I'm left really in a state of complete uncertainty as to exactly how it all worked out, because the report that you produced suggests that there is something quite seriously amiss.
It certainly does. Is there anything that you feel can now be done, Geoffrey?
Well, I think we ought to have an investigation of it. The Controller and Auditor General ought to get into it himself.
Because
but, you know, what's clear,
if it had been the other way, if AWM had handed over records in such a shambles, then they would have been hauled before the National Audit.
17,000 boxes.
Bill, the shambles was created by your government that willfully committed an act of vandalism, did it without preparation, without planning, without putting in place an alternative. It was government at its worst.
I'm not buying that side
I'm
of
sure
the
you would agree with that.
What I'm saying is that with regard to the proper accounting procedures, I'm quite sure that there is a really strong case for reopening this issue to make sure that we can find out through the Public Accounts Committee exactly what's happened. And maybe the Court of Auditors. A lot of this money appears to have come from regional funds.
And if the case is reopened, you would see really no fear that anybody at AWM has done anything wrong at all during this process?
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, this was rigorously undertaken, and the progress that was made in terms of making sure the information was documented was absolutely spot on. What I would say is that it is right, this money should return to the West Midlands. My concern is that the BIS, actually, in terms of this documentation process, is hiding behind it to stop that argument being made.
Geoffrey,
one thing that is quite clear is the money has been taken from the West Midlands and not invested in the West Midlands. It was designed for the West Midlands, designated for the West Midlands. And what we have now with the LEPs, which are struggling to find their feet, is really a pale imitation. I mean, we'd never, for example, let's take the new big Jaguar engine plant that's coming in Wolverhampton area, that was the land there was prepared, bought and prepared for that specific project and taken over by Jaguar and now being used. We'd never have got that ready in time for the engine had it not been for the West Midlands, Advantage West Midlands. And that is the real truth of the matter.
I think there really is a case for having a very close look at this, to look at it again, to make sure that the money has been properly accounted, and indeed to have another look to see whether or not there is some way of restoring the money back to the West Midlands area.
Can the Public Accounts Committee do anything as far as the Biz Department's concerned?
Well, at the moment it appears. I'm certain they can, yes. I mean, they've got the powers of investigation, and I'm going to ask them to look at it.
Do you think, final reflection on the record of AWM, that in the end, what do you think the verdict will be once this is all factored in?
I think the verdict will be a very strong one in terms of the role of AWM at a strategic level, getting investment sites ready, investing in New Street Station, the redevelopment of Longbridge, a whole host, a list that goes on and on. My concern is that the replacement in the Regional Growth Fund of the projects that have been identified in the West Midlands, only 8 of them have currently got funding after 18 months.
Well, it's a work in progress and we'll keep watching. Thank you very much indeed. Particular thanks to Gerard for being with us here today. Well, now, our